Welcome to the Deep Dive,
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Deep Dive, Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast. Might be one of the few podcasts, RJ, where I'm not like, oh my gosh, we've got so many like incredible things to talk about, blah 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 blah, all this stuff, because instead it's the season's wrapping up, team's not going to the playoffs. The big exciting stuff of the last couple of weeks was all the kids coming up, but they're all going down now. And so it's just kind of like this little bit of a we're coasting to the finish kind of moment, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's really been this week, I think, for the team and kind of everybody around is going through the motions and just kind of getting to the end of the regular season. Because I think, as you said on a recent post game, there is so much that can be done and needs to be done to change. There's a lot of change that needs to happen, but there's absolutely nothing anybody can do about it for at least the next week. And so we just kind of have to get there. And I know next week's pod, too, we'll have a ton to talk about with the exit interviews, with probably hearing from Ron Francis and Dave Haxtell, all of that stuff. But in the meantime, I think we have some things that we can talk about this week.
Yeah, there's definitely some stuff to talk about. And hey, look, there's still 2 Kraken games left this season, RJ. They're both on the road, and one of the best places to go to watch some road Kraken games, and that is, of course, Queen Anne Beer Hall, our wonderful sponsor for the podcast. 2 games left to go enjoy a giant pretzel while watching the Kraken. Got a million screens to watch the game on. Lively atmosphere, a bunch of Kraken fans there around you. Goal horn when they score, all that good stuff. So definitely go check out Queen Anne Beer Hall for these last 2 Kraken games and, the rest of the offseason as well. I mean, you could go catch the Mariners games there. Lots of fun stuff. I know they're starting to build out their Mariners schedule and then even some like Seahawks offseason stuff. So, definitely recommend going and checking out now one of their 2 incredible locations up there for Queen Anne Beer Hall. Let's go ahead and talk about some news and notes. Not too much news this week, just because, like I said, it's kind of the end of the year. Most teams aren't doing too much, but there was a couple interesting items to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we'll start off with Yanni Nyman, someone who I know you were very interested to see how he would do in Coachella Valley. And Dylan, it's only been, 2 games? 2 games for him?
Yeah.
And he already has his first AHL goal. And you know what, Dylan? It was a game winner.
Yeah, and it was really good too. Like, this was the kind of play that I wanted to see from him, right? We know he's got the shot. We know he's got the scoring touch. We know that he could be useful on a power play, all of that kind of stuff. But the thing that I've forever been most interested in is that he has the size, doesn't really have the skating, and how is that going to translate over to the North American game and the North American professional game? And I think this goal from him gives us a really, really good idea at how he's going to project through next season, what he still needs to work on, what, kind of already is going to give him a big edge playing in North America and help him as he works towards the NHL here. And so I'll just kind of quickly describe the goal for everybody. It was a tip-in goal. He was about like halfway between the shooter and the net, and he was able to get his stick on the puck, redirect it goes in. Phenomenal hand-eye coordination. We knew he had that. Really excited about that. But the bit about it that I found so fascinating and what I really wanted to see from it was he was engaged with the defender, right? The defender is trying to move him and can't. Like, that's what's the big important thing here, is that Yanni Nyman's size was preventing the defender from really kind of clearing him out of that shooting lane. And it allowed Yanni Nyman to get his stick on the puck. And also, because of Yanni Nyman's size, he was able to box out the defender, right? Like the defender is pestering him. He's all over him. It's not even like a small defenseman either, but he's all over him from the back. He's pushing him. Yanni Nyman's barely moving, and Yanni Nyman's just focused on the puck. And that's what allows him to get the redirect, get the tip-in goal. And I think that that's really, really promising to see, because I was worried about his stance and his skating and how, leverage and all of those kinds of things, and to see if that was going to be a problem for him over here, if he was going to need to work on those things before he was going to be able to be a physical presence, before he was going to be able to be somebody who was hard to move, hard to push out of the way. And what this goal showed us was it's not really a problem. He is a physical presence.
Yeah, and Newman at only 19 years old, though, one thing we should remember, though, he was playing against men in Finland. And I know there's a lot more open ice on the Olympic size rinks, and you don't really
Yeah.
have as much of that contact in that game, I think. But I got to think that does contribute at least somewhat, right?
Yeah, it does. And there's still elements of it that aren't pretty, right? About this. Like he's still, hunched over and he's kind of bent at a weird angle, and I still don't know about that long term. I think an NHL level defenseman would be able to leverage him a little better, would see that, hey, coming from behind isn't really working. Let me go to the side and then push him out of the way. Like stuff like that is going to, he's going to encounter that. And I think that that's going to cause him some more problems. But for a first goal, it being a lot of the stuff that I was, and I don't want to say concerned about, but I thought was going to cause him to maybe have a slower transition over to the North American game. It answered a lot of questions for me, and I was really, really excited to see it. And, maybe even more excited than him based on that goal, that photo from post game of him with the puck, RJ.
Well, I mean, hey, he was pretty excited in the goal celebration.
That's true.
Although more than that, I think his teammates were excited for him. I mean, you can tell just how great the culture is there in Coachella Valley with how pumped everybody was for him scoring that goal.
Oh yeah, no, they are such a unit and they are such a great team down there, and everybody wants everybody to be successful. Everybody wants everybody else to succeed and to just win together, right? There's just so few teams that it's that like blatantly obvious that everybody just wants to win together, and I just think that that's incredible.
Yeah, definitely. I cannot wait to watch them in the playoffs this year. So I guess the second bit of news that we have, if we're done with Yanni Nyman for the moment, I'm sure we'll talk about him plenty later as the Firebirds playoff run goes on. But this one, not quite as good news. The Kraken have shut down Vince Dunn for the season. They decided not to play him in any of their remaining games. He didn't go on this final road trip. And I think it's a smart decision. It's a prudent decision. Whether he can play or not at this point, we don't know exactly what's wrong with him. But he, took a big hit from Martin Pospisil. What we thought is probably a concussion he was dealing with after that, and then took a few big hits in his return. And then at that point, he hasn't really been back since. Dylan, this just seems like a prudent move, given that there really is nothing left to play for here, and just make sure Dunn's ready for next season. You don't want to risk anything for these games. Exactly.
No, this makes a lot of sense, and it's still one that I'm still a little surprised he came back at all, right? I mean, I still don't know what there was to be gained from that.
Nothing really, but, he's a competitive guy, and if he was feeling well enough, I don't know. I mean, I still wouldn't do it, but that's the kind of thing where you also don't want to get on a player's bad side by telling them, hey, if they want to get out there and play and help their teammates, telling them they can't. I don't know. That's a tough one.
It is tough. It's just that they ran into the one situation that you would be worried about, right? Like it's one of those situations where there's basically no upside. There's only potential downside, and then they found the potential downside, which was him getting re-injured and having an issue of some kind. And so yeah, that's the part about it that's a little like for me. He had got injured initially in that game against Calgary on March 4th, comes back April 1st for that game in San Jose, plays through that. And then, that Kings game, I mean, he was getting beat up. Blocking shots always kind of hitting him weird. A stick hits him weird, gets physical, and then, obviously gets thrown out of the game also to be talked about. So there was a lot going on in that one. Definitely hope that he's going to be, good to go for next season. I'm sure he will be. That's what's going to be important because as we've talked about in the past, right? He was the Kraken's best player this year. And I don't think there's even like much conversation to be had beyond that. I think that's a pretty just easy statement to make this year.
Right. I wouldn't argue with that at all. I think he has been the Kraken's best player. And I mean, the biggest takeaway from a lot of the time that he's missed this season is just how much the team misses him when he's out of the lineup. Mm-hmm. It's just a different team, and especially as far as generating offense. They have a lot of games where they've been held to one goal or fewer this season, and I feel like more than half of them, which is more proportional given the amount of games he's missed, have been the ones without Vince Dunn. I mean, they just don't move the puck out of their D zone through the neutral zone into the offensive zone the same way when he's not on the team. And that's a big problem if you're going to miss him for an extended period of time. Yeah, he'll finish the season with 59 games played. So, I mean, that's 23 games missed by the end of it. That's a real big chunk of the season.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about over a quarter of the year. And not just like in general, one of the things too that was great to see from him, and this was something that we had talked about over the offseason that we wanted to see from him, was he got so much better on the power play. Right? He played 81 games last year. In the 59 that he played this year, I mean, he had technically an infinite amount more of power play goals because he scored 0 last year and he had 4 this year, so it's not even like quantifiable. And he only had 3 less power play assists this year, and again, he missed a large chunk of the season, so you have to assume with the full amount of playing time he would have passed that number. That was a big deal, and that was something that the Kraken really needed from him. That was the one area that we had talked about where he could kind of step up and evolve his game a little, or at least that was the place where he was going to need to have some more success to repeat the kind of numbers that he had last season. And he very much did that this year. And I think, one of the areas when we talk about the Kraken looking like a different team this year, the power play, the last little bit here has not looked great, especially because it is so reliant on point shots and whoever's running things from the back end, whoever's quarterbacking, finding good shooting lanes and stuff like that. Vince Dunn really kind of seized that and became the guy back there this year. And without him, power play doesn't look great to begin with all the time. And without him, it's looked pretty rough.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing that you can look at with his absence, though, is Riker Evans, who's been able to kind of fill in that role playing with Adam Larson and do that a little bit better. And I think that's going to be really important because one thing that you have to, I mean, Evans might just take care of it by itself, but I think one thing that kind of has to be addressed this offseason, where you can't go into next season, I guess, this reliant on Vince Dunn being in the lineup.
Yeah. Because
I think about it next year, if they're able to have the turnaround that they want, if they're able to kind of be in playoff position, you think about it from another team's standpoint, and I hate to kind of put it this way because I don't want to talk about like hurting anybody or anything like that, but this stuff, these conversations kind of take place around playoff time where if a team is that reliant on one defenseman, that you go in and into a playoff series and be like, look, let's get a body on Vince Dunn every single time we can. Yep. Let's rough him up. Let's, play to the edge and maybe even have some dirty hits there. And if you can take him out, great. I mean, the Kraken are pretty helpless at that point. Or if you can even just anger him enough, he might take a penalty, he might retaliate, he might do something like that. We know the whole Undertaker thing. Mm-hmm. I just think having somebody else, like now we see Riker Evans might be able to do that, but having somebody else there maybe prevents another team from thinking that way.
Yeah, and as I'm kind of also looking at things for him this season, some things stand out as well, right? So most of his numbers across the board match up very close to last season, and you just, if you were to take like the per game averages, it all just about evens out. However, he did have 23 more penalty minutes despite playing significantly fewer games this year, so there was that element of it like you talked about. This is the one that's really standing out to me, though, is hits, RJ. Vince Dunn last year had 115 hits in 81 games. This year, he had 39 hits in 59 games.
Huh.
That's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I don't feel like he played significantly less physically this year, but I do think that his game did like kind of evolve to be more puck focused, right? Baking plays focused, right? Helping the team get up and out of the zone, stuff like that. And I also feel like he did, he's gotten better every year he's played with Adam Larson as far as certainly net front defending and stuff like that. I do wonder if he's really starting to pick up and hone in on some of those more nuanced defensive things where he's not having to rely on just playing physical. He can just, use his stick and poke check a puck away or sit in a passing lane and stop a play from ever even happening instead of having to respond to the play happening with a hit or something like that. But that one really kind of stands out. And the NHL corrected a lot of hit numbers and inflated them largely after that, but that to me says that he really played a lot less physical this year.
Right. I think that's a big enough difference that you can say that's pretty indicative of a change in style of play, at least a little bit. I'd have to look into that. I mean, you kind of want to look into video and see the different little things that he's doing, but that's an interesting observation there.
Yeah, so that's just something to consider for next year, is that he's playing less physical, but he's taking more penalties. So
Yeah. Although I look at the penalties, I just went game by game on his game log, and
Yeah.
you know how many games he had with more than 4 penalty minutes? So it's more than a couple minors this season.
I would say a decent amount, right? Like, because there was a couple times where he took some big penalties, right?
Only four. Only four
Okay.
games. He had 20 penalty minutes in that Kings game, his final game of the
Yeah.
season. And, that includes the getting sent off for the game. And then he had 14 against Colorado in November, and that was the
Yeah.
other one. And then 5 against Edmonton, 5 against Columbus. And that's, of course, just a fight each.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's just the minor penalties.
Well, that's basically, those 2 games account for just about half of his penalty total, like penalty minute total for the entire year. So
Yeah, that'll do it.
yeah, when he went off this year. That is for sure. But definitely wishing him a speedy recovery and to be back at 100% for the Kraken next season for sure.
Definitely. All right. So next bit of news that we have, and this one is a lot more fun than the Vince Dunn stuff. We have team awards. So the Kraken played their final home game of the season last week against San Jose. And after the game, as they do every year, they did their team awards, and they're voted on by different groups of people, but there are 4 team awards. There's the fan favorite award, of course, voted on by the fans. There is the Pete Muldoon award, voted on by the media and the players. There is the Guile Fielder Award, voted on by players and hockey ops. And then there's the 3 Stars Award, which is just the results of the 3 stars, which I guess is voted on by the local media. I don't know. Who does the 3 stars, Dylan?
Yeah, I mean, it is local media, right?
Is it? I think so. That's how I've always heard it expressed. But like, we know a lot of the local media, Dylan. Like, we don't decide the 3 stars.
No,
and I don't know who specifically does. So
somebody, a mystery figure decides the 3 stars.
Yeah, so we have the 3 Stars Award, which is decided in aggregate over the whole season by a mystery figure. So that's a fun one. But we'll start with, I think, the most important award of the 4. And maybe you disagree with me here, Dylan, but I think it's got to be the fan favorite award.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you talk about team awards, like that's the one I always look at, and you really get the sense of what the fans are thinking and who they like that year. And for me, anyway, it was no surprise. I would have been surprised if it was anybody else this season. But the fan favorite award won by Joey Decord. I mean, Dylan, if you've been listening with us through the whole season, I mean, there should be no surprise why he wins the fan favorite award. But I mean, what stood out to you the most, I guess, about how he connected with the fans this season?
I think it's just his honesty, right? One, it's that he's not afraid to just, have personality, but that comes from honesty. And he's just a very sincere individual. When you talk to him, you're getting, basically a stream of consciousness from him. And that really does play with people. People know and recognize sincerity and honesty, and they appreciate it, especially from athletes. And I think that that's been a big part of this. He's been honest about his process, about the emotions involved when he came up and had to battle for the backup spot against Chris Drieger this year, when he had to come in and fill in when Philip Grubauer went down for injury, right? Like, he was honest through all of those steps with how he was feeling, what he was feeling, what he wanted to go out there and try to accomplish. And then as he was accomplishing things like the Winter Classic, he spoke from the heart each and every time. And I think that really helped him connect to a lot of fans, and as it should. And I think that that's something that a lot of other athletes around all sports should kind of do as well. But I think for me, that's the big bit there.
Right. It's rare to see in sports, and I think even rarer in hockey, that you see somebody who approaches everything like that. And I think he realizes that, this is kind of a gift, right? I mean, breaking into the NHL at 27, he certainly didn't take anything for granted. And you see that every day, where he wears his heart on his sleeve, and he says what he thinks. And I remember earlier this season when he was kind of talking about his process of getting ready for games, because all goalies kind of have a mental process to get themselves into game shape and what they do on game days. And he said, years ago, as he was growing up, he would always, get really serious on game days, and, nobody talked to me. And a lot of goalies will do that. And he said he doesn't blame other goalies that feel like they need to do that to get into their process. Everybody has their own way they go about things. But he just ended up kind of being grumpy and no fun on game days. And at a certain point, he realized, well, maybe I don't need to do this to get into my game mentality. And I kind of stopped doing it. I just was myself, and he kept playing well. And, the difference was he was just a fun guy to be around at that point. And I think it helped him in a lot of areas. And so you he's different than a lot of goalies where, on a game day, you want to steer clear and you want to give them their space. Joey's always happy to chat. He's always happy to talk to you and have a really fun conversation. So, I mean, certainly from the media side of things too, he certainly endeared himself to us. And we saw it last season too in Coachella Valley. Man, they love Joey Daccord. Yeah. Like more than anybody else, I think those fans have connected with Joey Daccord, and they still love him. They have, I think, Joey Daccord bobblehead night that either is about to happen or just happened. It was yesterday. And seeing how excited the fans in Coachella Valley got for that, even though he's no longer on the team, was really cool to see.
Yeah, he is and forever will be their boy. Like no question about it. No question about it. It's really, really cool stuff. And then, one thing also, right? Just the phenomenal success he had this year, doing what we thought was undoable for a Kraken goaltender, RJ, and being well above 900, the save percentage. I mean, that's, like you said, it was a feat we did not think was really possible. And he just crushed it this year, sitting at a 916 right now. That tells you a lot as well.
It does. I mean, you go back to the over-unders we did at the start of the season. I think it over-under a 900 save percentage for any Kraken goalie. And I was like, under. Hit the under all day. I just didn't think it was possible, even if they were playing well. And, hey, Joey did that to his credit. And I think, especially if you look at, what the fans' expectations after the first couple seasons of Kraken hockey, maybe goaltending was probably the lowest expectation. And, he just blew that out of the water. So good for him performance-wise. And two, when things are going well, like nobody celebrates like Joey Daccord. You look at when he's picked as one of the 3 stars of the game, how fired up he is. Fans really connect with that too, because he's celebrating like they are. He's pumped up, he's whooping it up, and that's how the fans are feeling after a big win.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's good stuff. Just some other quick things on his season here. 30 quality starts in 49 games. That's fantastic percentage there. And then I think the other thing, right? Just the level of battle and compete that he had this year for this team. 11 overtime losses is a lot for one goaltender to have in a season, especially somebody who didn't necessarily totally. I guess 49 starts is a decent amount. That is kind of dominating things in today's day and age of goaltending splits. But like that's a lot of them, a lot of OTLs, and that's because he was keeping this team in games. This is a team that has struggled to score all year long. We might talk about that a little bit later on in the podcast. And he was able to get them there and keep them in situations. I mean, they stayed in the playoff hunt realistically well past from when they should have been gone and eliminated because of all of the work that he was able to put in for them this year. So yeah, Joey Daccord, phenomenal season, absolutely deserving of that award.
For sure. So the next award that we'll talk about is the Pete Muldoon Award. So this award goes to the player judged to be the most valuable to the team's on-ice success. And this one is voted on by media and the players. So Dylan, you and I both voted on this award. This is the one award that we got to vote on. And the winner was Jared McCann. A bit of a surprise, I think, to the two of us. But I mean, there's no questioning how valuable he was to the team. I just know that each of us had maybe picked somebody different as our first place vote.
Yes. I was a little surprised. I do wonder, RJ, how much of this is just, leading point getter and maybe, if not so much the media, but maybe guys in the room, right? Like this is a team where I could see that, guys not maybe wanting to make waves or do anything, even though I assume it's like a secret ballot kind of thing, and they just maybe go with that. But also there's many times throughout the course of this year, right, where when the Kraken were in their losing streaks and stuff, where Jared McCann really kind of came out and became a little bit more of a vocal leader, at least towards the media, and talking about the things that they need to work on. And you could tell how upset those stretches in time were for him. And I do wonder if maybe he did kind of step up in some of those darker moments for the team, and this was their way of kind of, saying thank you.
Yeah, and he's a great lead by example type of guy. Nobody hates losing on the Kraken more than Jared McCann. I mean, you can see him feeling it after every big loss. And so I think, the guys certainly respect that. I respect the hell out of that. And you talk about on-ice success and contributing to on-ice success, especially for a team that struggled to score goals. I mean, you have the guy who's led the Kraken in goals and points in every season they've existed. How do you not have a guy like that in contention for contributing the most to on-ice success?
Yeah, no, I mean that's kind of a big deal, and so yeah, no, I get why he's there. As I thought about it more and stuff, I get why he's there. Vince Dunn, I think, could have been it. We talked about like earlier, right? He, in my opinion, best player for this team, meant so much to this team. But again, he's missed a significant amount of time, so I could see that.
Yep.
And then Joey could have been up there again. And then just gonna throw this one out there. I don't know why Oliver Bjorkstrand. It's like team that struggled to finish. We know Jared McCann's going to finish plenty and lead the team in scoring. That's what he does. Oliver Bjorkstrand right behind him, only 4 points back. Also broke the 20-goal barrier. Only two guys that are probably going to do that this year, which is again a conversation for later. And was the guy that Dave Haxtell used, similar to Jared McCann, kind of all over the lineup, just as things were developing, as guys needed a pick-me-up, right? And he was just kind of added to different lines, and so I just want to recognize that a little bit.
Yeah, and as guys got injured, because that's something the Kraken had to deal with a lot, was forward injuries, and they really couldn't keep consistent forward lines together for a big chunk of the season. And it seemed like whenever a line needed a boost, you throw Oliver Bjorkstrand on that line, he's able to kind of take care of it and make sure they're producing enough. So definitely valuable, and I think a little bit more of a subtle way, even though second in points on the team. You definitely didn't forget about him at all this season. So I think that's a smart pick there. And yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, Joey, like it's kind of apples and oranges to kind of compare the impact of a goalie versus the impact of a top scorer. So I wouldn't blame anyone for going either way there.
No, definitely.
All right, so the next award is the Guile Fielder Award, and this one is given to the player who best exhibits the qualities of perseverance, hustle, and dedication to hockey. And so this one is voted on by the players and by Hockey Ops, and the winner is Jaden Schwartz. And Dylan, I wasn't very surprised to see this one. I mean, when you talk about perseverance, when you talk about dedication to the game, all the stuff that Jaden Schwartz has persevered through. I mean, especially this season, but really you go back the last few years. Yeah. I mean, to stay in the lineup and play as many games as he had, and to just show up and go through, day in, day out, like that itself is not as easy as it is for other players, right? For Jaden Schwartz. And, you got to respect that. And I know his teammates respect it.
Yeah, and as they should, right? Like he's been a phenomenal leader on this team, and leading by example, and perseverance is the word, right? Like you cannot find a more perfect word to describe Jaden Schwartz and what he's meant to the Kraken. Like you said, not just this year, but in years past as well, working through as many things that he has had to work through. And so, I was not surprised. I think that's kind of the perfect thing for him. And, I'll go ahead and throw in there too, on a team of guys that don't always necessarily go net front or kind of get into those physical battles out there, at least the forward group, Jaden Schwartz never backs down from those, right? And that was a really important thing for the Kraken this season when he was in the lineup, the fact that he was going to those areas of the ice, especially given the injury hardships he's had in his career and this season, to just continually go back there and continue to play his game, I think is a big deal as well. And so, he's definitely deserving of this award.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, whether it's been injuries, a skin condition, just all the stuff that he's battled through. And I know after year one with the Kraken too, he only played 37 games. Mm-hmm. And, if you had told us after that season, he'd go and play 71 and then what looks like 62, I think we'd be happy with that.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, and then the final award is the 3 Stars Award, and we probably won't talk about this for very long because it's fairly straightforward with the 3 stars, and Joey Decord won it, so we've already talked about everything he's brought this season. But congrats to Joey Decord on the 3 Stars Award.
Yep, and I did look it up, RJ, and it is officially decided by a shadowy mystery figure. It's what it says. So
okay, there we go.
No, it is
the shadowy mystery figure knows what's up.
Yes,
I'll say that much.
the mystery figure of local media knows what's up for sure.
All right, we got to figure out who that is. Can do some detective work next season.
It probably shouldn't be too hard.
Yeah, no, I think ask around. Probably don't need to ask more than 2 people.
Knowing the personalities involved, I think we can figure this one out.
Yeah. All right. So that's it for the team awards. What do we have next, Dylan?
I mean, that's kind of wrapping it up for news and notes. I mean, this is kind of, news and notes related, and that's just kind of the draft position situation for the Kraken. Last night, Arizona lost in regulation to Calgary, which, it does help out Seattle in the sense that Calgary and Seattle are now tied in the standings. Calgary's going to have the tiebreaker. So for the moment, the Kraken are sitting, in what would be the 8th pick overall in the draft. But it does mean Arizona not collecting a point means that Arizona cannot catch up to Seattle. Seattle will not be able to leapfrog Arizona, which now means the highest the Kraken can draft is 7th. And that would require the Ottawa Senators to win out and the Kraken to lose out.
In regulation.
To make that happen. Yes, in regulation. Points wise, the Kraken need to not gain another point, and Ottawa needs to gain all of the points to make that happen. I think we're probably where Seattle is right now, RJ, in the 8th spot is realistically what we should be expecting.
Yeah, I think that's probably where they're most likely going to be. Ottawa winning out. I think they have at least one fairly tough game left on the schedule, if I recall correctly. And then, for the Kraken, you can move down there. I mean, Calgary is tied with them in points, tied with them in games played. So, if the Kraken get another win, you probably are risking moving behind Calgary. But still, passing New Jersey and Buffalo, the Kraken would have to, get points in both games to do that. I don't necessarily see that coming given how they've played recently.
Yeah.
I'm thinking 8th or 9th, Dylan. And I know we touched on a little bit last week, but I mean, how big a difference is it, do you think? The difference between 8 or 9, or say 7 and 9 in this draft.
Yeah, I mean, I have a top 7 personally that I kind of view as slightly better, but then there's a large chunk of players like after that. So if you're going to be 8 or 9, there's a good chance that one of my 7 is probably available there. And then there's just a lot of people, especially a lot of defensemen that are going to go in that range. So it's always better to pick higher just because then you're getting your choice of that group. You're getting your guy, the person you think is going to fit in with your organizational development, with your core group of players, all that kind of stuff. So it's important from that perspective. But this isn't like, oh my gosh, there's 6 guys and you can expect one to maybe fall to 7. But if you pick 9th, the drop off is massive. It's not one of those kinds of years. So I think the Kraken are going to be fine no matter what. It's just, you always, if you have the opportunity to pick higher, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, that's pretty self-explanatory, I think. And then as far as lottery odds, I mean, the difference between 7, 8, 9, it's 6.5%, 6%, or 5%. So that doesn't really move the needle much for me. You got to get lucky either way.
Yep, definitely. Were you surprised at all, though, that Ottawa would not have the tiebreaker over Seattle?
A little bit. I was expecting everybody to have the tiebreaker over Seattle, but no, Ottawa does not, and which is weird because they only have 4 OTLs.
Yeah. How?
Yeah. So that means they have 24 regulation wins, but they have 36 wins. So that means 12 wins
in overtime
have come in overtime or the shootout.
That's pretty nuts.
That is. It is. I guess they're better than the Kraken in the extra frame.
Yeah, well, the doubly so because the Kraken had 6 to put that in context for everybody. So.
Yeah, weird, Ottawa. And also, I looked it up. Their final 2 games against the Rangers and Bruins. I don't see them winning both of those.
No, probably
with
not.
Both of those teams having something to play for too.
Yeah, no, that doesn't bode well. So 8 it is. Let's go.
Yeah, probably 8 or 9 we're looking at.
All right, so that's the kind of the situation there for draft position. And by the way, I keep saying that I've got a group of 7. I'm going to talk about my 7 on the next prospect chat over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey. So if you've been dying to know the 7 and my reasoning for why they kind of have separated themselves from the pack, tune in there.
Yeah, definitely. And hey, Dylan, tell everyone when that is.
Oh, that's on April 29th at 7 p.m. It's Monday. It should be a really good time talking about prospects. Oh, I'm so ready for it.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch it. I mean, it's time to look at the draft because we talked a little bit after recording the Red Glare. I was just asking you about some of the prospects, and I forgot how fun it is this time of year. Just, especially if the Kraken have a high pick in things, just kind of hearing your take on all the guys. I feel like I learned so much so quickly. So I just can't wait to learn about this draft class, because by the time the draft rolls around, I get really into it, even though I don't know nearly as much as you do.
No, I mean, it's so exciting. Like, there's a reason it has become the event that it's become for so many people, right? Because it's the future, and it's where dynasties are made or lost. And that's what's just, I don't know. There's so much on it, and it's just so much fun to talk about and try to scout and project how these players are going to develop at the next level. It's just, there's so many elements to it too that it's really fantastic. I hear Fuji there getting excited too about.
Oh, hi Fuji. I know
Fuji's
on
board. He's ready for the draft. Now, speaking of young players, RJ, one of the other things that kind of did happen this week was that Shane Wright played his last game with the Kraken this year, and so did Logan Morrison and Ryan Winterton. They were all sent down. We knew to expect that for Shane Wright, right? Like they had told us, we knew, given his situation with his entry-level contract, that he was only going to play through that Sharks game, that last home game of the season. Was a little surprised to see Logan Morrison and Ryan Winterton join him in being sent back down to Coachella Valley. We talked about it a little bit last couple of post games, but again, I still don't entirely know the reasoning there. Like, these still seem like valuable game reps to go ahead and get those guys in. And Coachella Valley just locked up first seed in the Western Conference last night. It's not really like they need them to finish out the regular season there.
Yeah, well, I think you were a little bit more surprised than I was, just given that the Kraken, they didn't play Morrison and Winterton all that much when they were up here. You know, they gave them some opportunities, they gave them some game reps, but they still healthy scratched them for two games for Winterton, 3 games for Morrison. Yeah. And I don't know, I didn't understand the reasoning behind that. So I figured if they weren't particularly eager to get them into the lineup when they were going to be up here for sure, you know, I wasn't surprised that they got sent back down. So it's unfortunate. I would like to see them playing in these games instead of some of the vets who won't be here next year, but clearly the team disagrees.
Yeah. Do you think it's just matchup based, right? Like, you get them in there against all the, like, kind of terrible
They didn't play
teams.
them against the Ducks.
I know. So it doesn't even...
That seems to invalidate everything, right?
Yeah, unless you were worried about that game being, like, overly physical or something. I don't know. Again, it doesn't make sense to me because they're valuable game reps. You want to get them that experience. It's worth something, especially because you're giving, them special teams time, right? Especially Logan Morrison on the power play. He was playing a lot of power play minutes. Like, that's valuable. You want to know what you have there from him, and how he can be used and maybe develop some chemistry with guys. So it is still surprising for me. I don't know. I get it that you also want to give, it's nice to give guys that are going to be free agents, some more playing time, finish their season well, go out there, maybe add another thing or two to the tape like Yams did yesterday.
And in Belmar, maybe getting him to 700 career games, which is nice, I guess.
Yeah, it is. It's just one of those things that from a long-term perspective, maybe a little head scratching.
Yeah. Although I also got an inkling that maybe they would do this too when I think it was their last home game when we were hearing from Hackstall against the Sharks, where he was talking about Winterton, who had some good chances early, but he said, he was kind of got lost later in the game, and that's why he didn't play very much. At that point, when a coach says something like that about a player, not necessarily like a huge criticism, but it tells you, maybe if there's an opportunity to send him back down, they're going to do that.
Yeah. But we did get to see them for a decent amount of time. And we got to see how they all kind of looked. And so I just wanted to take like a second and talk real quick, RJ, about what are our expectations for them next year, right? Like, roster wise, I think Shane Wright, we can start with him. Obviously he's the biggest name, and rightfully so. He played the best. Expectation roster wise, he's gonna make the team. He's gonna be on the Kraken next year. Nothing's gonna derail that. So outside of obviously something bad happening, but that's the lock, right? Like, that's super safe to say.
Definitely. I mean, he's going to make the roster. There's no question about that. It's just, where does he start off in the lineup as far as usage and line mates? And we had that discussion a little bit for this season when he came back up after this last call up. And I know we kind of disagreed on where you thought that he should be placed initially. Mm-hmm. And I think the question for next season is, do they kind of ease him in and give him maybe more of a bottom six role to start, and then kind of see if he earns it and elevates his way into the top six role? Or do they just start him straight off in a top six role like he was playing at the end of this season and just let him trying to hit the ground running there? And as well as he played at the end of this season, I think it's still a very open question, because he's shown he can play in that top six role. He's shown he can be quite effective. We all just saw it in these games, but it's going to be a little different next season with every team having something to play for. The quality of opponents just in general is going to be better than what he saw in this past call up. And, guys are just generally going to be hungrier in training camp, and everyone's going to have to earn their spots. So what do you think, Dylan?
I'm the opposite of where I was before, right? Like I was like, oh, ease him in, get him hungry, right? Make him go out there and earn it and want it, because that's what's worked for him in the past. But he just started off that way. I think, look, I've not made it a secret that I think he plays the brand of hockey that the Kraken need. Especially if they're not going to make like a big top six forward acquisition over the course of the offseason, either through trade or free agency. He is going to be your lifeline to having a sustainable offense next year. Because, right, this current group, if everybody else is more or less the same, they proved that is not something you can count on them for. Right. And so he is your lifeline to that because of his play style, how it opens things up even for other lines when he's not even out there on the ice. He just forces other teams to have a different mentality that will create more time and space for guys in this lineup. I think Shane Wright is going to need to get a decent amount of time next year. Again, assuming Hackstall's back and all of that kind of stuff, top three lines are going to play about the same. So he's going to be on one of those three lines. Does it mean that he's on the third line or the first line? Who's to say, really, right? So it's kind of hard to have that discussion. But I think Shane Wright averaging, over 15 minutes for sure should be something that we expect. And I think that's something that the Kraken are going to have to do with him, just because I think he is kind of that important to them, again, unless they make some sort of other substantial move in the offseason.
Right. Yeah, I'm good. I'm glad you're on board here. Take the training wheels off. I don't think you need to start him in a role where he's playing anything less than 15, 16 minutes a night next season, and just let him go out and try and run with that and play how he has been playing. I mean, you look at his ice time over that call up, and it was basically 15, 16, 16, 16, 16. Pretty consistent. I mean, it's rare. We actually don't see ice time that consistent for a single player usually from Hackstall, because it's usually so performance based. But I think that was kind of the plan as far as utilization for him all along. And so I think that's about what he's going to start with. And then I think, of course, if he plays well, he should have the opportunity to get up into that 17, 18 minute range, as we saw from Matty Beniers when he was playing well in his rookie season.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think that is like Hackstall watching the minutes, or it was because, during the same stretch where he was there, you had Jared McCann centering your leading point scorer and goal scorer, centering your fourth line, and Hackstall was just straight up rolling four lines. Like, it was just shift, 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 shift. There was no doubling up of anybody really at any time. And so everybody was averaging a quarter of the game because everybody was playing a quarter of the game.
Well, I think that contributes to it. But when you choose, look, the coach chooses the lines, and you can also choose those based on how much playing time he wants a particular player to get. And so if you're thinking, okay, we'll just roll four lines and we'll just do that, and everyone's going to get 15 minutes, that works with the plan to get Shane 15 or 16 minutes.
Yeah, I guess so. I just say, like, that seems more of a byproduct of like the larger philosophy than anything more Shane centric.
Well, look, I don't think they were planning exactly, because I mean, it was like 1602, 1601, 1551, that close. I don't think it was that much the plan. I think that's a coincidence.
Yeah.
But still, I think they probably had a range generally for how much they wanted him to play.
Yeah, potentially. So
we're told there's a plan. I believe there's a plan.
Yeah. It would, again, I don't know why it would be so difficult to tell everybody what said plan is. I mean, we obviously, before the call up, he had done that interview where he had said that, hey, I expect next season to start off slow and work my way up the lineup. The only reason that you would maybe do that, RJ, is if you're worried about the rookie wall. And we talked about this last week with him, because it's inevitable. Everybody hits it. He's going to hit it next year. Just everybody build that into your expectations for him, is that he's going to go through a time where he's going to go through a slump and maybe not look so great. It's just what everybody does. I don't know that easing somebody in really helps you avoid the rookie wall at all, because it just comes down to how often you're playing at the NHL level. So I think, give him the minutes and give him, more opportunities to find ways of working through it. Unless he's really physically not at 100% because of the rookie wall and the kind of sustained pressure that your body takes playing all those games at that high level, I don't know that I would try to ease him in hopes of avoiding, something that, like I said earlier, I feel is pretty inevitable.
Right. It's going to happen no matter what. And the way to get out of it, like you said, is reps. It's reps, and also for his confidence. I just want him more opportunities to produce, more opportunity to succeed. Just get him out there for chances. And I think the more of those he's out there for, just mathematically, it's going to result in more production, and production is going to drive his confidence. And you can see how driven by confidence he can be. You look at that game where he scored a couple goals against the Ducks, and he has 2 goals early, and all of a sudden he's making passes between the legs on the boards, and making some really great creative plays. You want to let that build off of itself.
Definitely. And obviously I'm not huge on projecting stats. Like I hate doing that every year, all that kind of like future prediction stuff. But just given the way he plays and everything, I know this was kind of part of the topic of conversation yesterday, and I'll just kind of reiterate it here for anybody who didn't watch the post game. He's going to be like a top 5 scorer on this team. And it's not because like, oh my gosh, Shane Wright's that good. He is that good, but it's also because if you were half a point per game player this year, you were a top 5 scorer on this team. And Shane Wright, just playing the way he is, where he's in and around the net as much as he is, will be a half a point per game player or better. Just it's hard to be in that area and not end up putting up that many points, given just being there, much less the skill level that he has. So I feel very safe already, not knowing anything about the situation for this team next year, that Shane Wright's going to be pretty high up there on the production side of things for the Kraken.
I agree with you. The bar is lower on this team than most. It's a team that struggled to score, but like you said, anyone who goes to that area that often, especially on a team where so few people do, you're going to collect points. Just one way or another, you're going to collect points. And on this team, like you said, you don't have to collect that many to be in the top 5.
Yep. And the guy who does go there on the Kraken, we talked about him earlier, Jaden Schwartz, RJ, 30 points in 60 games. Exactly a half a point per game player. So there you go.
Yep. And over a full season of 82 games, that'd be in the top 5.
Yeah, easy. He'd be clearing things. Actually, he'd be up there. So that's the situation there. Let's talk about Logan Morrison next, RJ. Lomo. Expectation roster wise, like, did you see enough to go ahead and pencil him in as the 4th line center for you?
I saw everything I could have hoped for, I think, with Logan Morrison, but I don't know that there's much he realistically could have done for me to pencil him in as the 4C already. I still think it's more likely than not that he probably starts the season there and earns that job, but he's going to have to do exactly that in training camp. He's going to have to earn that job. And so we'll see how he shows up to training camp, what he's able to do in the preseason, but I think he's going to be given every opportunity. Kind of like Ty Karchi. I mean, that's the comp that a lot of people are using, because they took the same path as undrafted free agents and were signed out of juniors, went to the Firebirds, did really well there. But I think it's going to be like that, where he's going to have that chance, but he's going to need to actually earn it in training camp.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think he's gonna be given the opportunity. We'll see how he plays. I mean, there's no reason to think he's not gonna play well, or at least play to his level and be consistent like that. But I could see them also, maybe starting the season with him. If there's a little bit of a rough patch for him, maybe he gets sent down for a little while. I could see him maybe being an up and down guy if they were to bring in another veteran center. Right, like just to have available and on the team, I could see that maybe being the case, or even like Ty Karchi this year with like Cartier and Yams, right, where they're kind of like in and out, kind of being traded out for each other through the first half of the year. I could see something like that with the 4C role with Logan Morrison.
And that does seem like Ron Francis' MO, right, is to bring in some veteran competition for the young guys and really make them earn the spots. It feels like every year, well, after year 1, that the Kraken have just had too many NHL caliber forwards for how many spots they've had. It's a good problem to have, but I could see them wanting that to be the case again next year and making the young guys earn it. But I mean, after watching Morrison and Winterton play, I think they have everything it takes to earn those spots.
Yeah, well, and with Ryan Winterton, I was just going to real quick say, I think he's the least likely to make the team coming out of training camp, and I think that's because the Kraken could see, and I think they're right to see, a larger role for him in the future, a top 6 role. And I think that you would want to send him back down to Coachella Valley. He's going to be, depending on the moves that Coachella Valley makes this offseason, given how many young guys they're going to are going to be graduating from major junior there, the amount of free agents in their top 6, Ryan Winterton's going to have, potentially a first-line role with the Firebirds next year, and I think you want him to play those minutes. You want him to develop that side of his game. He's got the two-way game down. He's got the PK work down. He's focused on all that this year and become very, very solid at it. But the bottom line is he projects to be better than that. He's got the ability to be better than that. And so I think having him start and play a majority of next season with Coachella Valley kind of being the guy down there, similar to what Shane Wright was doing this year, I think would be really good for his development long term. And then you can start looking at him being a top 6 player for the Kraken either late next season or certainly starting the following season.
He does have that upside, and I think it would be good to get him some time in that role. And also one thing to remember with these two, Morrison and Winterton, there's always that and between the names, right? Yes. We talk about them together a lot, and it makes sense because they were teammates in Coachella Valley, teammates in junior, like they're good friends. So we talk about them together, but we can forget that Winterton is pretty much a full year younger than Morrison. Yes. And so when you talk about a development track, a year makes a big difference. 20 versus 21 is huge. And so we could end up seeing that year's difference in just when they're ready for a full-time NHL role.
Yeah, I mean, it's that, and it's also, like I said, it's their projected futures as well, right? Like their overall potential. Logan Morrison is a really good player, but he's not going to be a top 6 player. Right? Like he wouldn't have been an undrafted guy if that had been the case, kind of thing. Right. And so, yes, he's succeeded and he plays super fantastic and he should be extremely proud of himself. And we are all so happy for him, but he's realistically going to be a bottom 6 guy. You can go ahead and work him into that role now because he's ready for it and he's closer to his ceiling. Ryan Winterton has so much runway left before he kind of gets up there towards his ceiling or even his floor that, you want to give him the opportunities to do that because it'll be better for him long term.
Yeah. And speaking of Winterton, though, what did you see from him in this stint? We talked a little bit about Morrison, what he was able to do. Winterton, I mean, he had less of an opportunity, I guess, ice time wise. He was averaging, somewhere between 8 and 10 minutes a night. You can't really do a whole lot with that level of ice time. But I mean, what did you see that maybe stood out to you, though, in that time?
That he was really focused on the idea of being a traditional 4th line player. Right, he wasn't too focused on being offensive. He was focused on coming in on the forecheck. Right, he finished with 10 hits. He made sure to get more hits than games played there this season. He very much felt like a 4th line player who was like a back checking winger. Right, he was the first guy back defensively for that line. He came the farthest back in their zone. He was playing below the goal line behind Joey and Philip Grubauer this year, right? Like when he was up here, he really focused on those kinds of things and putting in that work because that was the role that he was in. So I think he excels at that. He's good at it. He's a smart player. He can pick off passes in the defensive zone. His stick work is really solid. Like he can stick lift guys like crazy. He's just really good at kind of sneaking in there, just doing that quick one so it doesn't ride up into their hands. It doesn't have to worry about a high sticking penalty. It's just enough to pull them off the puck, and then he can kind of swipe it from out underneath them. So I like that aspect of Ryan Winterton's game, but again, I want to see him, and I think long-term he projects to be higher up in the lineup where we're going to see him take more shots and try to assert himself offensively because he didn't really try to do that. And I think some of that was because he wasn't in the role to do so, and I don't know that he was really told to do so. But long-term, that's what I would want to see from him next, is him come in and use that great skill set that I watched him have in London in Major Junior, and we've seen him have in Coachella Valley, but at the NHL level.
Right. And it just takes a little more time. And maybe we saw a hint of it too in his final game up with the Kraken against San Jose. 4 shots on goal in that one in only 7 minutes of ice time. He had a really good start to that game, I think, before,
Yeah.
the finish that Dave Haxtell alluded to. But, you can see hints of it.
Yeah, definitely. So excited for the future for both of them and all of that good stuff. Have about 5 minutes left here, RJ. And one of the things that we've talked about is just, as the season comes to an end and I go and I look at like the Kraken stat page and I see the fact that, as I spoke about earlier, if you were half a point per game player, 0.5 points per game, you'd end up in the top 5 of this team. And I think that kind of idea and is just it explains why the season kind of went the way it did.
Yeah, I mean, lack of goal scoring, and we pointed to it from kind of earlier in the year and all the way through now. It's been the biggest difference from last season where, I mean, from again, this is very basic stuff. Anybody can see this, a team that's, maybe top 5 in the league in goals one year and, or top 10 and bottom 10 in the next year, you're going to have a big difference there in the results. But I mean, digging a little deeper is kind of, why that's been the case is something we've kind of touched on in the post games, because it's what a lot of people want to know and talk about.
Yeah, it is. And so one of the big things, and this was something that we were asked about when we would do like guest spots on other people's programs, the shooting percentage, RJ, and how unsustainably high it was last year and kind of where the Kraken were going to fall this year. And as a team, RJ, the team shooting percentage was at 9%. And now that sounds maybe reasonable. It's not. It's really low. That's good enough for 29th of 32 teams in the league. And then you compare that with last season, RJ, and care to guess what the team shooting percentage was?
Was something like 11%.
11.6%, or second best in the NHL. So you literally went from second to 29th in shooting percentage, and it doesn't seem like a lot. The idea is you're talking about 2.6% difference, but that 2.6% over the amount of shots that a team takes, which for this year, the Kraken took, let me get back to it here real quick. The Kraken took 2,297 shots. 2.5% more of those going in helps out a lot. That's a decent amount of goals that you're talking about all of a sudden, right? So I do think that was a big part of it, was the shooting percentage regressed. It's probably going to even out. This is a team that has skilled players, RJ. Again, maybe they don't always go to higher percentage places on the ice, so that maybe they trend a little lower. But like, this team should at least be able to be in like the 20-ish area for shooting percentage normally.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, you look at the Kraken's company around the bottom of the shooting percentage stats this season. You've got Chicago, San Jose, Anaheim, Columbus. Those are teams that I think are a tier less skilled than Seattle. And it's just the wild ride we've been on from a shooting percentage standpoint these last 2 seasons. You'd have to think next season it would end up somewhere between those two numbers. And I mean, Dylan, just for people generally, because we talk about shooting percentage, and it's not, fans look at that stat, a fair amount, but maybe, newer fans don't look at it a ton. Like, how much of shooting percentage is luck versus skill? I know that's really hard to quantify, and that's a big question, but like, what do you think on that? Just your intuition on that.
I mean, from a team standpoint or a player standpoint, I guess it's about
team
the same
standpoint, because that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. Team standpoint. I think it can be a little bit more skill based when you're talking about a team versus players individually, because if the whole team is struggling the way the Kraken did this year, I think then you can start pointing to things like, what offense are they running? What's their power play setup look like, right? Things like that, because it's odd for everybody to have a down year. Like, it's hard to do, to have 22 guys all at the same time shoot below their career averages, right? Like, that's not normal. So I think you have to start looking at things and say that it's more of a skill issue, or realistically it's more of a setup and system issue than anything else. When you're looking at a player individually, you can say that, well, look, the guy went on an absolute tear for a month and a half and it kind of pushed his average up for the year. Like, that happens. Sometimes we see guys go on a tear for an entire season, like Jared McCann last year, right? Like that does happen in hockey. And so that's why it's also, there is an element that it could just be luck for the Kraken this year as a team, because hockey, for whatever reason, RJ, when the universe like rolls the dice at the beginning of the year and says this team's going to be lucky and this team's going to be unlucky, it somehow stays over an 82 game sample size. No other sport operates the way that hockey operates in that regard. But if you are just destined that season to finish poorly, you will just finish poorly. And there's nothing anybody can seemingly do about it. And it'll just exist as this weird blip in history. And I still don't understand why that's the case, RJ, but it is. But I think when we're talking about the team as a whole, I think this points towards larger issues systematically for everybody, that everybody had such a down year together. The fact that the team shooting percentage was that low, and I think a lot of that is the stuff that we've been talking about. Nobody went to high percentage areas of the ice. Nobody ever wanted to work inside towards the slot where you're going to have the best chances of scoring a goal. Nobody wanted to get net front. Nobody wanted to be there for rebounds. Nobody wanted to screen the goalie, right? Those are all the things that you do to increase your chances of goal, which is basically what shooting percentage is, right? Like what's the percentage of the time it's going to go in when you shoot it. They didn't do a lot to make this number larger than it ended up. And I feel like that's really the story here for the team.
Right. I think whenever you look at those numbers, because that's the first thing I think about when I look, especially on the extreme ends of shooting percentage, when I look at it from a team perspective, is that you have to dig a step deeper and kind of ask yourself, okay, is there maybe a non-stat reason why you could see this happening? Like I sort by shooting percentage of the low end this season, Chicago Blackhawks. Mm-hmm. I think there are kind of common sense reasons you can look and see why that might be the case when you have, when you just have not much talent on the roster. You look at a team like Tampa, second in the league. Okay. There's a lot of really skilled shooters on that team. And with the Kraken, I think, like you said, when you dig a little bit further, you can see they're not going to the areas of the ice they need to score and to convert. You could see for a lot of this season when we covered them closely, like they were, for a while, they were going with a volume shooting approach. And it wasn't always working. It worked for a little bit and then it stopped working. And, that's the kind of thing that can juice the numbers a little bit too. And if you're doing a volume shooting approach, you're not scoring many goals. I mean, they just had 50 shots on goal against San Jose and converted one of them. That's the kind of thing that'll contribute to it. And so I think they can read into that a little bit for next season. I think you're going to expect some positive regression there, but you can't expect it to go back to what it was last season. Right. And I also wonder how much Francis, and particularly all the very smart analytics team people that are advising him, how much they're reading into that number and what they can expect for next season.
Yeah, that's an interesting point and something to think about. I went ahead and I clicked on Tampa too, just because obviously they are a skilled team, but care to guess like their top two guys shooting percentage wise? Because it makes sense.
I mean, like, is Kucherov up there?
No.
Okay.
Like it's Anthony Duclair.
I mean, he just has a ridiculous amount of points, so I guessed him.
I know. But yeah, but it's Anthony Duclair, who has, he's only played 15 games there, trade deadline acquisition, but a guy who likes to go in and around the net. He can be kind of a power forward type. He's somebody I actually want the Kraken to maybe consider this year in the offseason. But it's Braden Point, right? Where is like every goal you've ever seen Braden Point score from?
I mean, it's from like those right around the net,
it's like the low slot.
Yeah.
And he's got 45 goals this year and he's shooting over 20% because that's where he lives. Like he just plays there. And so he has a high shooting percentage and he converts on those chances. One, because he's that good. Yes, he's good. That's a big part of it. But I mean, this is his second straight season of shooting over 20%. And I guarantee you, if I was to pull up his NHL Edge page, which I guess I could go ahead and try to do quickly here, you're going to see a ton of shots coming from the slot area, just because that is who he is and where he wants to go and play the game. And that's the kind of stuff that the Kraken need to do a little bit more of.
Yeah, definitely. And that's, I mean, we talked about Shane Wright being one of the guys who's willing to do that. And I mean, and you look at Shane too, this is not sustainable, of course, but this season he shot at 33.3% over his, admittedly short 16 game NHL career. He's shooting 31%. He shot 25% last season. I know it's 1 goal on 4 shots, but still, like those are the places you go to where your shooting percentage gets higher than you'd think it could be.
Yeah, no, I pulled up Braden Point's shot chart. Okay, so low slot, so like just above the crease, But and then up to like the middle of the face-off dots, or like the lower hash marks for the face-off dots. He's had 219 total shots on goal this year, RJ. 105 have come from the low slot. If you expand that out to the mid slot, you add another 40. So 145 of his 219 shots this year from the slot.
That's a pretty sizable chunk there.
Yeah. Like that's the kind of stuff you got to talk about. That's the kind of stuff you gotta do as a player in the NHL if you want to have success. And he's not a big guy, listed at 5'11", 180. So he's probably
he's definitely not one of the bigger players on the team.
So it shows you that it's a mentality thing, right? And that's some of the stuff that I think like the Kraken maybe need to work on next year. When they start running into scoring troubles, the way that they have this year is that you've got to work your way out of it, and you got to go to those areas, because that's how you'll fix your scoring trouble.
Yeah, definitely. And we've talked about having an identity, having a new kind of system that they're running. That's all the stuff they're going to be talking about in the off season, but unfortunately can't do anything about for the next week.
Yep. Got 2 more games. Again, everybody, you can go and enjoy those games over at Queen Anne Beer Hall at either of their incredible locations. Should be a lot of fun. Can't wait to see how the season kind of wraps up here, RJ, and then get to those exit interviews next week. It'll be an interesting podcast next week. That's for sure.
Definitely. We'll have lots and lots of stuff to talk about as everyone kind of goes over their season.
Yep, definitely. I can't wait for it, and we will see you all next time.
Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons. Absurdly Sane, Alaska Joe, Alex, Alvi, Amy, Andrew, Andre, Anonymous, Anthony, Becca, Beef, Ben, Brad, Bryce, Burnt Creme, Caden, Kat, Kaylin, Chandler, Charles, Shazzle Dazzle, Chip, Chris, Christian, Clutch, Cody, Connor, Coop, Corey, Cutter, Dan, Danny39, Denise, DJ Singletone, Duthan, Dylan, Evie99, Eli, Elizabeth, Empty Net Hockey, Ethan, Evan, Fusion Mix, Gaby, Gabrielle, Gary, Gregory, Helena, Habak, Jane, Jenna, Jessica, Joni, Joseph, Josh, Joshua, Julia, Justin, Katie, Kepler, Kevin, Kitty B. Kraken, Cole, Kyle,
L. Bell, Leanne, Levin, Light, Little Tennis Guy 8, Lonnie, Mac and Cheese, Maeve, Mark, Max, Maya, Michael, Michelle, Nick, Night Drop, Noah, Nunya, Olivia, Paige, Patty, Paul, Rayanne, Randall, Rebecca, Robert, Rock Liquor, Ryan, Sarah, Scott, Sia Kraken, Sean, Sergey, Sergeant Pickles, Shannon, Skeletal Tendency, Steven, Striatic, Tasty Kobold, Team 114 Chris, Ty, Virginia, Wendy, Where the Slovakians At, and Zoe. Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.